Let's be honest, our world is getting seriously crowded. We've built up, we've built out, and we are just plain running out of space on the surface. But here's a wild thought. What if the next great frontier for us isn't up in the sky, but right here, under our feet?
So, that's the big question we're diving into today. We're going to look at the money, the tech, and the strategy that could unlock this massive, hidden world of real estate, and in the process, totally reshape our cities and maybe even the countryside. Okay, so it all boils down to one simple, massive problem. Land on the surface, especially anywhere near our cities, is an incredibly scarce and super expensive resource. You know, this constant fight for space, for houses, businesses, roads, it creates this huge bottleneck for growth because we're literally running out of places to build.
Right, so this leads to a really fascinating economic idea. There's this moment, this tipping point, where the insane cost of digging a tunnel will actually become cheaper than using the land on the surface. And when we hit that point, believe me, it will fundamentally change everything about how we build our world. And this right here is the key metric for this whole underground revolution. It's called the crossover point. It's really just a simple calculation. You pit the cost of digging against the value of the land right above it. When the cost to create a cubic meter of space down there drops below the value of that same cubic meter up here, well, that's when the game completely changes. And wow, this chart really lays out the challenge we're facing today. Right now, tunneling is just incredibly expensive. We're talking 200 to 400 euros for a single cubic meter. Now compare that to the value of rural land, maybe 10 to 30 euros for that same amount of space. That massive, massive gap is exactly what technology needs to close. So how on earth do we close a gap that big? Well, the strategy is kind of like a two-pronged attack. It's not about finding one single silver bullet. It's about combining steady, step-by-step improvements with some really radical new ideas to hit the problem from every single angle.
Think of it like this. On one path, you've got evolution. That's all about making the giant tunnel boring machines we use today smarter and way easier to operate. And on the other path, you've got revolution, which is about completely rewriting the rules of digging and, maybe most importantly, figuring out what to do with all the dirt we dig up.
So let's look at that evolution path first. You've got companies like Heron Connect developing these amazing systems, like the center of thrust, or COT. What it means is that steering a multi-million-dollar machine that's as long as a city block becomes as simple as using a touchscreen. This reduces the need for super specialized, hard-to-find operators, which, you guessed it, brings down costs and the risk of mistakes.
And then you have the other side of the coin, the revolution. And it's perfectly summed up by the mission of the Boring Company. They're not just trying to make things 10% better, they're chasing a 10 times reduction in costs by totally changing the industrial process.
And this is where their big, game-changing idea comes in. See, one of the biggest costs in any tunneling project is just hauling away all the dirt and rock you excavate. They call it muck in the industry. The revolutionary idea is to stop treating it like waste. Instead, you process it right there on site and turn it into valuable construction bricks. Get it? This one simple shift turns a huge expense into a way to actually make money.
And the impact of that one idea is absolutely staggering. By just getting rid of the need to truck millions of tons of dirt away, you could slash your logistics costs by more than 70%. This isn't just a small improvement, it's a total rewrite of the economics of digging. So the big question is, when does all this happen? When do we hit that crossover point? Well, the thinking is that it'll happen in two phases. The first crossover should happen in our cities around 2035, because, land values there are already through the roof. The second, much tougher crossover for rural areas, that probably won't happen until after 2040, once the tech becomes radically cheaper.
Okay, let's dive into that first phase. In big cities, the value of surface land is just so extreme that we only need a pretty moderate drop in tunneling costs, say 40 to 50%, to make the whole thing work financially. This is absolutely where the underground revolution is going to kick off.
And the key to making this happen in our cities, it's something called multi-utility tunnels. The idea is simple. Instead of every single company digging up the streets for their own pipes and cables, you dig one big tunnel and everyone shares it. The huge upfront cost of digging gets split between transport, water, power, data companies, which makes it drastically cheaper for everybody and, best of all, frees up the city's surface from constant construction.
All right, but now let's jump forward. After 2040, this is where things get really, really cool. Once tunneling costs have plummeted by maybe 70 to 90%, it becomes so cheap that it makes sense even in places where land isn't expensive, and that unlocks possibilities that honestly sound like they're straight out of science fiction today.
And this chart here shows you exactly how that's going to happen. Today, you can see that huge chunks of a tunneling budget are eaten up by logistics and specialized labor. But those revolutionary technologies we were talking about, like turning muck into bricks and automating the machines, they're going to shrink those two biggest slices of the pie down to almost nothing.
So what do you do with ultra-cheap tunnels out in the countryside? Well, one of the most powerful ideas is underground vertical farming. Just imagine automated, climate-controlled farms that are completely safe from droughts, floods, storms, anything happening on the surface. It's a way to build a totally resilient and stable food supply, no matter what the weather decides to do.
So, we've seen the potential, right? I mean, from cleaning up our cities to climate-proofing our food supply, the possibilities are huge. But, and this is a big but, this isn't just going to happen on its own. Getting there is going to require a very clear, very deliberate strategy.
So, what are the big takeaways here? What's the playbook? Well, to make this future happen faster, we need to focus. First, you have to target cities because that's where the economics make the most sense right now. Then, you mandate shared infrastructure, like those multi-utility tunnels, to spread out the cost. You've got to invest aggressively in the disruptive tech that turns waste into value. And finally, we have to stop treating every single tunnel like a unique, one-off mega-project. We need to standardize them and turn tunneling into a predictable, repeatable industrial process. And all of this leaves us with one final and pretty profound question. If we actually pull this off, if we succeed in moving so much of our infrastructure and industry underground, the logistics, the utilities, maybe even our farms, we're going to get something incredibly valuable in return, our planet's surface. So what do we do with it? What kind of greener, more human-focused world will we choose to build when we finally have the space?